Okay, today is Tuesday, May 22nd, 2018. We're at Cal Goff's house interviewing Paul Plate for the Georgia State University Gay Spirit Visions Oral History Project. With me helping to interview Paul is Randall Kumba. And let me just explain before I ask you the first question that the first question has many, many parts to it, and I don't expect you to memorize them, so I'm going to ask it and I'll go back and ask each part.
Okay.
And the first part is going to be about just your general background before we get into the GSV thing. We've got lots of tape and lots of videotape, so if you want to stop for any reason, we can do that, and that's not a problem. And so the first part has to do with your family background, and by that I mean where your parents and grandparents came from, what part of the country, when you were born, how many siblings you have, your partnership history, and a couple of experiences from your childhood that you believe had a profound effect on your values or your personality, who you are today. So I'll go back and repeat each section of that.
Is this supposed to be blinking?
I don't know. Okay, so just in case it was not working before, this is the oral history interview for the Gay Spirit Visions Oral History Project for Georgia State University's Gay and Lesbian Collection, and we're interviewing Paul Plate today. It's May 22nd, 2018. The interviewers are Randall Kumba and Cal Goff. The person being interviewed is Paul Plate, and we're here at Cal's house to do the interview. So, where did your grandparents and parents come from? Did you know your grandparents?
Yes, I knew all my grandparents.
Okay.
What I know may or may not be true, but what I know is that three of them, we first knew that they were all from Italy.
Okay.
And one of them, my father's mother, was her father, my great-grandfather, was an orphan. And he was from France, and an Italian family adopted him. So we're not able to trace our heritage any further than him on that side because there were no records at that point. So my father's mother was born in Italy, and my mother's mother was born in Italy. My mother's father was always considered Italian, but something we didn't know, and unfortunately never thought to ask, because of things we learn from a child, we don't always get an opportunity to reflect on and think, I don't really know why that's that way. Mm-hmm. So we know that he was born in Venezuela, but they never said that he was Latino. They always said he was Italian. So that seems like a disconnect in the way we think of things now. It wasn't necessarily then. But certainly he lived in Italy for a part of his life, and he was part of the immigration to this country at some point. My mother was born in Italy, and I think she came over here when she was 8 years old. If you were to speak to my partner, who got to know my mother the last couple of years of her life, the stories that he tells her don't coordinate well with the stories that we know. And he also knows that they can't be true. Not that they're not true, but the dates don't work or whatever it is. So Mom was born in Italy, and she had a really, really okay life there, has some really fond memories of where she lived with her extended family and on a farmish place near Milan. Mm-hmm. It was called Genoa, and mountainside, Alps, flowers, nice things. And but poor folks. So that's what I remember about that part, which is also very much. But then they came over to the United States, and one of the first times that I realized about disconnects in what we remember from our childhood is when I was studying family therapy. So here's an example about the stories that we know are stories. Some of them were stories that were created in the mind of the child or interpreted in the mind of ourselves as children. So there was a movies for TV when they started many years ago, and there would be 3 nights. It would last for 3 nights, and there was one on Ellis Island. You may or may not remember it. And I watched it and cried, thinking about my mother. And she would go to sleep early, so I didn't call her at night. And I waited till Thursday morning. I called her to talk to her about how courageous she was and how frightening it must have been, and all of those kinds of things. She was crying and I was crying. And then there was this long pause, and it was one of those pauses that said, uh-oh, something. So I said, what? And she said, oh, nothing. I said, no, there's a pause here. What is this about? And she says, we didn't come in through Ellis Island. So that was one of the examples of what I put together as a child, immigrants, Italy, boat, Ellis Island. That was the only things that were connected. It turns out they came in through Boston. And those who had a little bit more money, like $10, could afford the boat passage to Boston and didn't have to go through what they had to go through in Ellis Island. Which was also set me up for further understanding about discrimination and hierarchy and all those kinds of things, because they actually were considered themselves different from the folks who did come in through Ellis Island, who were poor, poorer people, say $10 less. So in all of our ways of being, we always figure out how to be better than somebody else or feeling less than somebody else for some relatively ridiculous reason. So I remember that being a really poignant moment about what my mom and I in our relationship and so on. My father was born here, and so was my aunt. And although you had large families generally in Italy and in France, here we have however family members there were there. Above them, my father was one of only 2 children, so I had 1 aunt. My mother was an only child. She actually had a sister, but her sister died soon after childbirth, like 3 or 4 days, never left the hospital. So here these 2 families come down to 2 people on one side and 1 on the other side, which was really unusual. And then my parents had 4 children, and my aunt had 5 children. So that's kind of like the way it was.
Do you know how your mom and father met?
They were in high school. They were high school sweethearts, literally.
In Boston?
No, in New York.
Okay.
And they went from Boston to New York, and they were part of the ghetto, the Italian ghettos in New York, in the Bronx.
So they met in high school.
They met in high school, and they knew they were going to get married, and they got married, and then Dad went into the service and was in the Navy for a while. And then when he got out, soon after he got out, I was born.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
Okay, and you have 4 brothers and sisters?
3. There's 4 total. I have a sister who's 3.5 years younger than I am, and with boys being slower and girls being faster, we were like, best of friends forever. My brother was 9 years younger than I am, and we never had difficulty But the thing that I remember is that when I was 18 years old, he was 9 years old. So that's, when you're younger, that's a really big difference.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 9 years older, as a 40-year-old and a 49-year-old, it's not the same. But I remember it as being a big divide.
Mm-hmm.
He remembers wanting to have more of a relationship, and I was being off doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a sister who's 20 years younger than I am. And the day that she was christened is the day that I left for college in West Virginia. So I never had a relationship with her as a usual sibling
Mm-hmm.
would.
Mm-hmm.
She felt more like a niece or a nephew,
Mm-hmm.
although she was my sister.
Mm.
I never moved back to the house
Mm-hmm.
after I left.
And you were born in New York?
I was born in the Bronx,
Okay.
and when I was 3.5 years old, we moved to Long Island. And that was also a big deal because Long Island was where Levittown was.
Mm-hmm.
And Levittown historically was really important because the men were coming back from the service and they needed housing. So Levitt designed Levitt homes, which were all the same, and made them affordable for service people to buy so that they could raise their families. And they also did something very interesting. They had no parallel streets, no parallel or perpendicular streets. I mean, obviously at the intersection they're relatively perpendicular, but so that you couldn't gain any speed in one of those neighborhoods because it was designed for children.
Mm-hmm.
So it was curves. Again, in terms of hierarchy and making people different, we were in the next neighborhood where every third house was the same, but we were different than them because they were in Levitt homes.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until later in my life that I realized these differences that I was unconsciously holding,
Mm-hmm.
and how I thought about myself, or how others thought about me or saw me, were really disconnects. So what later on when we did at the agency that I was director of, we had a diversity institute, and I would be able to say, you see me as this powerful executive, white privileged so-and-so, and I see myself as child of an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
and all these different things. We had, for example, I had a lot of Jewish friends, and that was really special. So I got to know a little bit about Judaism and a lot about ritual,
Mm-hmm.
Jewish ritual. And we were raised Roman Catholic, so we knew a lot about Roman Catholic ritual. And we shared rituals, and that seemed like a normal kind of thing to do. The reason why we did that is the mothers and the Protestant kids wouldn't let us play together. So it was a form of discrimination that I didn't take in that way at the time, but I realized later on that this was a form of discrimination, and we couldn't play together. And how ridiculous was that?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there were no Latinos and no blacks in the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
but we never saw that. I remember thinking, why did we not think about that? And it's because we didn't have experience of blacks and Latinos, other cultures, and so it wasn't like we were keeping them out. They weren't part of our experience. And then later, I remember when the first black family moved into the neighborhood, and I don't remember any big deal about that. There may have been, and there may have been as far as their experience, but I don't remember any of it. I think I was getting ready to move on to college at that point. So.
Okay. Your partnership history. Just we'll come back to that later too. But what's the sequence?
Well,
and we'll ask you about your coming out stuff later too. But
Okay.
just were you partnered in college or that before college or
No,
after college?
no, not in
Okay.
college or before college. It was long after college.
Okay.
I was partnered in around 1990.
And what year were you born? Where were you born?
49.
Okay.
Around 90, I think, 89, 90.
Doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah, around that,
Ballpark.
because it was the beginning of the HIV epidemic, and I met my partner. That's interesting. I can't think of where I met him. I do have blocks of like blocked out memory that I might or might not be able to retrieve, and that's been part of my history all my life, but it becomes more significant now. But I believe that we met. Oh, I know how we met. I know exactly how we met. There was a guy that I lived with for a while that I really liked. And we realized after, we didn't move in together, but we spent time in each other's homes. And we realized early on, like 4 or 5 months into the relationship, that this wasn't the man of our dreams. We weren't the man of each other's dreams, but we didn't want to leave. So
Was this in New York?
No, this was here in
Okay.
Georgia.
Okay.
And we said, this is not, so let's, but I don't want to leave, so let's stay together for a while. So we did that. And then, years later, I was heading to New York for a showing of the quilt, the AIDS quilt. And my friend Van, this guy I was talking about, I saw him online, and he was with this guy. And he said, come here and meet Tom. So I met Tom, and I looked at this guy, and he looked at me. And here's another way that I make differences of people. He was bald, a bald man, but he was very attractive, but he was a bald man. So I wasn't then attracted to bald men the way I am now. And and they were seeing each other and living together.
They were.
They were, Van. So Van was sort of my ex.
Yeah.
And Tom.
Where did he live? In Atlanta?
Yeah, in the Morningside here.
Okay.
Right here. And all of a sudden I started getting invitations to their house for dinner and this and the other thing. Well, then Van was out of the picture and I was in it. And at one point this is how ridiculous I can be. I was invited to dinner, and I knocked on the door, and the person who opened the door, I didn't know. He seemed familiar, but I didn't know who he was. And turned out it was Tom, and he had gotten a toupee, a really wonderful, good toupee, and now he wasn't bald, and what was going on for me was totally different than him without his hair. So it's like, oh, now I'm really attracted to this guy. It's like, isn't this bizarre?
Yeah.
So when we started living together, it was very interesting because then he would take his toupee off when he went to sleep. So I had a relationship with a bald man and a man with hair,
Oh, interesting.
and it seemed like there was a subtle difference in what was going on. So he was my first person, and that I considered a partner, and we were together for about 9 years or so, and it had its good moments and it had its challenges. He had some challenge with alcohol, and so did my mother, although she went to her death denying that. Every time you talked with her, she denied that she had that. Even if you never brought it up, she did. So, and what people who have alcohol challenges don't know is those who have been invested in relationships with them, we have sensitivity. Just being around somebody who is an alcoholic, the alarms go off for us. So anyway, Tom was different, and I loved him, and he loved me. And it wasn't like the greatest love affair ever. Sex wasn't always really wonderful, and it wasn't easy, simple, like enjoyable kind of things. But we liked being together. We liked doing our lives together, and that was what was good about it. And he was challenged with alcohol, and at one point we tried different things, and so I don't want it to seem like the ultimatums is the only thing that I did, but I was really frustrated. I finally said to him, people were trying to get me to go to AA or NA, whatever the
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon, right? Al-Anon. And I was I was a professional counselor, and because money was a problem, I was doing 2 additional groups a week just to raise money. And I remember getting really, really pissed off at him and saying, I'll be damned if I have to do another group. I have to participate in another group, because you can't take care of your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so unlike me. I can't, like that level of confrontation with him was just really amazing. So he really got it at that point. And I said to him, this will drive me crazy because I'm so codependent, but I will leave your house and I will go to Decatur, to where my house is. And if you call, I will answer the phone, I will be there. I'm not going out, I'm not doing anything else, but I just have to take care of myself and be away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that he got it, and he started really working really harder at his alcoholism and his addictive stuff. He wasn't a raging alcoholic, but you don't have to be a raging alcoholic to have it impact your relationship, how you live your life. He got a job he was in charter flights and stuff, and made a lot of money that early on, and before I knew him. And he got connected to the folks that, something over here, and then they were in Marietta, and they were going down to Miami to reopen Eastern, and he wanted to go, and it was this was going on during the Olympics, and we had just sold his house in Morningside because of financial issues, and we moved to Decatur, and we were during the Olympics, and all my family was here visiting, and we were at lunch. I was at lunch with one of my sisters, and Tom called me, said, come home right away.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom never said anything like that to me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I need you right now.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, we'll come in. And he told me there was something wrong with his blood work and his heart and his liver. I don't remember the details aren't important. And what I didn't know then is this was the beginning of the end of his life. And there had been problems with us, so I said things that to him may seem like extreme, but I said, there can't be secrets, and you're a secret keeper, so you have to make all the mail available to me from now on. I have to be able to see everything. Because what happened was he had a lot of money, and he lost it all, and we didn't need to lose it all, because I'm a really good organizer. And he wasn't. He was a really great guy, but not a real good organizer. So he lost 2 businesses, he lost 2 limos, he eventually lost the house. And none of that was necessary. If he had included me and enabled me to be part of the process. So he agreed. We couldn't keep the house because he was in so much in debt. And it was part of the early on epidemic. Early on in the epidemic, when people were diagnosed and realized they were going to die, so they started living their life to the fullest because they would die, and so they were in debt. So what?
Right.
And he lived, and the debt caught up with him and became a problem. So he was going to, we moved to Decatur, and this event happened, and I said, I'll go with the doctors to either know I want, and I made the mistake of not insisting. I said, I want to go alone. And it was like one thing after the other. Well, you have this, and we think this, so we need this test, and no, now that shows negative. So I was believing him. It's like, why I was believing him, I don't know. And he said, well, they've cleared everything, and they want me to come back in 6 months for more testing. And I'm going to Miami, and I'm leaving on Tuesday, and I'm going to go work there. And it's like, well, there were some challenges in our relationship. And I said, well, maybe...
You mean move to Miami?
Well, not move, but he was going to work. He was going to get an apartment there, he was going to move, work there, and come back and forth. He was working for airlines. I was just not clear about what was going on. Sometimes we just don't want to see some things. And so then he came the next. That was like right after the Olympics, and then in '97, so we went back and forth, visiting each other while he worked in Miami, and in '97. I had something going on, and it turned out just to be kidney stone. It was actually gravel, so it was minor, but gravel's like a stone, but it's an easier process to get rid of. But for a minute or two, we didn't know what was going on, and I was in the hospital. They were doing an exploratory thing, and it was outpatient. And he got really scared, and he flew home to see me. And he, ironically, he almost got killed. It was a really bad thunderstorm, and lightning hit the plane and all that stuff. He was almost killed, and I was like on the couch, like, I'm fine now because it just released, and it scared him, and he said, I'm coming home. But Tom wasn't good at always, he didn't always tell exactly the truth. And he said, I'm going to move back in 1998. We're going to stop this because he was, he was missing me, and he was scared when he thought I was dying or something was wrong. And we had a really good Christmas and New Year's with that in mind. And then my grandmother died. She was 93, and she was a real pistol, really incredible woman. And I remember I went to New York for the funeral, and my father and mother were still alive, and I was in the backseat of the car. We were talking about my other grandmother and how old she was. She was an old lady. She came to live with us, and she raised us for a while because my mother had illnesses and so on. And she had, again, the things you think about when, that I think about that make me distant from people. My grandmother had a smell of an old lady that bothered me as a child. So it was two smells. There's like an Italian smell. There is, I can't explain it, but there's the mothballs, because her generation would put everything in mothballs, and I could not stand that smell. So there are actually pictures of me with her, like going like this. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman, and I really, really loved her. And I didn't realize how much until after she died. And when I'm telling stories about her now, now. And
so you went to the funeral?
So we were going to we were going to my other grandmother's funeral.
Oh, okay.
And I said to my mother, I was talking to my mother, and I said, what? She was an old lady, I don't remember. My mother said she was always an old lady. If you looked at her high school pictures, she was an old lady. In her high school picture, she looked like an old lady. And I said, so now how old was she when she came to live with us? And she said, oh, she was 55. It's when she died, she was 55. I was 55, sitting in the backseat of my father's car going to my other grandmother's, talking about this old lady, right? And I was her age. And that just really hit me as far as like that, you know, where we are in our history is just so bizarrely connected to the stories that we tell and things that we feel about age and you know, so on. And here she was. I was already older than she was when she died. And she was this really old lady. So that was that story. So Tom, so I got back from my grandmother's funeral on a Sunday, and some good friends picked me up at the airport, and they were really quiet and upset. And I thought it was because they were good friends with no, I didn't know why they were. I'm confusing the story. I didn't know why they were confused. I thought they were just, you know, trying to take care of me. And I finally said, "What's going on? Something's going on." And they said, "Well, I kind of wanted to wait till you get home." And I said, "What?" She says, "Well, Tom's in the hospital, and he didn't want us to tell you until you got back from your grandmother's funeral." So he was in the hospital in Miami, and I called him, and he said he didn't want me to come because they didn't know what was going on, and he wanted me to wait till he got out of the hospital, or till we knew more what was going on, so that if I had limited time off, that I could spend it in more strategic things. I said, "Okay, fine." And by the next, like, Thursday or Friday, he said, come right away. So it was the opening of the Winter Olympics of '98, and I had spent a couple of weeks there with a lot of his family members and his siblings, and his parents were coming, which completed he had two brothers, so the two brothers were there and his sister-in-law, and now his parents were coming because they were going to start chemotherapy on the Friday, either Thursday or Friday. It's a little blurry right now. I thought it was a Friday, but usually they open the Olympics on a Thursday. And it was, I didn't have such a great relationship with his mother, and I had made sure that the room was always wonderful. You know, like when he got cards, I placed them where he could see them. I would never allow dying flowers in arrangements, because I think that it's horrible if somebody's really ill and see a dying plant there. So I redid the arrangements all the time. I kept everything really wonderful. And here his mother and father are coming, and they're due any minute, and then the hospital says we're changing his room. And I said, you can't change his room, because it was all perfectly set up. So I was frantic about that. So we moved him, and I moved all the stuff, and moved all the things, and
where were his parents coming from?
From Durham, so finally it all worked, and they were there, and they were supposed to start chemotherapy, and they were delayed. And we were literally in his room watching the opening of the Olympics, and I'm going, how bizarre is this? We're really just not dealing with our feelings and what's really going on. We're being diverted to this thing, and we're waiting for them to attend, and all of a sudden, if you look at the opening of the Olympics then, they had like 44, there was some reason, for the number of trumpeters, those long trumpets, and like at the castle, and they were literally doing as they wheeled in this car with the chemotherapy to start administering it. I've never forgotten that. It's like, how ironic. How ironic. And basically never talked to him again. Because the chemo was 3 days of chemo, and he was like pretty much unconscious. And I never gained enough ability to have a conversation. And we didn't have a conversation because he wasn't sick enough they never said he might die. We knew he was dying,
Yeah.
but they never said he might die.
Right.
What they said was chemo, home for a week, chemo, back in the hospital, chemo, home for a week, back in the hospital for chemo. So our idea was that during that week that he was at home, we would be together and be able to
Right.
have this conversation. And he never survived it.
Mhm.
He didn't survive it.
And that was 97?
98.
And 98.
98.
Okay.
And there's some significant things there because I found out things like he had two brothers, and one of them was a buddy of mine, and the other was not so much. And I was really, really good friends with his brother, one of his brothers, and his brother's wife, and we had independent. I had a relationship with them as a couple or independently, and then with Tom, with my partner, or not with my partner. And I use the word partner loosely because I don't think there's a word that describes what we had.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't exactly what you think of in terms of partners. His father would ask for time with me alone without Tom, like we would be in a car going somewhere, and he said, I'm going with Paul, and he would ask me questions. And it felt really good that I had this relationship with his father. And when Tom died, we were going to have the body brought to Atlanta to have the funeral here in Atlanta, and then the burial was going to be in Durham. So people would, because he had been away from Atlanta for a while, people needed to have some contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then his parents wanted him to be physically closer to them. So we were in his apartment, and his two brothers were there, and his sister-in-law. And he was talking to them, and he said, "Oh, okay." They said, "Okay." And they said, "Paul, God wants to talk to you." Okay. And he said, "Is there a place in the apartment that's isolated where I can talk to you?" And I said, "Well, there is a place, but I have to wait a second while I walk there." And it was a walk-in closet in a hallway. And so I walked into the closet and closed the door. And he said to me, "Are they respecting you?" "Oh, yes." "Do you feel that your voice is being heard?" "Oh, yes." "Do you feel that our family is acknowledging you?" and so on. "Yes, just fine." Ironically, where was I when I was having the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
In the closet.
Mm-hmm.
I said to him then that Amy and I were writing the obituary, and that we would send him a copy, and he said, "Oh, no, I'll take care of that for the local paper." And I said, "Oh, okay." My whole family pretty much came to Atlanta and then flew to Durham.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like guests at his parents' house. And we were online waiting to get in there. And my level of resentment was rising. And they said, "Why are we waiting in line? Aren't we part of the family?" And it was clear we were not part of the family.
Mm-hmm.
That we were waiting in line, and people said, "Hi, how are you?" And we had gifts and things, and they go, "Can we tell them who it's from?" It's like, and my sister went in to sign the guest book and look at and next to the guest book was the obituary. She came out and she had this look on her face, and it was a look of horror. And I said, what? And I said, "I know what it is." And I started, she says, please don't go in there. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's what you think? I shouldn't go in there and see? And I read the obituary, and I'm not in the obituary.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am in the closet in Miami, and he's telling me I don't need to send him a copy of the obituary,
Mm-hmm.
that he was going to write it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's a surprise, but from that point on, I was a major bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to my family, "We're leaving." And I said, "Well, we just got here. We're not even in the house yet." I said, "I don't care, we're leaving." We left, and I took them to dinner, and we celebrated the dinner as a family. Went to the burial the next day, and I was a bitch. And It was difficult. I mean, my mother was the oldest person that they didn't even offer her a chair. They said, Paul, we want you to sit next to the family. I went, yeah, really? You want me to sit next to the family now because of the big show? And I said, my mother, who's the oldest person here, you don't even ask her to sit down, really? You know, it's like, oh, you know, I didn't make a scene as far as a public scene, but as far as his father and his brothers, they got it. They got the full breath of
Why do you think
anger.
that this father was concerned about how you were being regarded? I mean, he didn't have to do that, but he did. I don't understand.
You know, country club, cardiologist, Duke, you know,
okay.
you know, all that stuff.
Okay.
I don't know it. We were friends. We were real. I had developed friends with relationships with that family for 9 years. I was friends with the aunts and uncles and grandparents and I mean buddies with grandmother, and she gave me recipes that the other family members didn't have, and we bitched about, you know, family members that we didn't like in common, levels of this. And then about 9 months after Tom died, I was cut off and no contact ever. And even when his father died, I sent them all notes, no responses ever. And ironically, his mother is the one who I had the least liking of. To put it mildly. And she sends me a Christmas card every year with just her name.
Very confusing.
And so I don't know why. I you know, make up stories about why, but I don't know why. And I confronted things that said things like, you're going to bury him in, you know, you're going to bury him in Durham with your parents when you don't even, you know, I said to his older brother, I said, when you are visiting, you know, the kids talk about daytime grandmother and nighttime grandmother because of the alcoholism. You know, you tell them you're leaving and going home, and you go to a hotel, you don't even tell them you're lying to them, and you're going to a hotel, you spend several more days in Durham visiting family and stuff, and yet you're going to make your brother spend the rest of your eternity there with them, really, when you won't even spend a vacation there with them. So I said things like that, but it was as we would as, I'm your friend, and so I'm gonna challenge you. I don't know. I don't know what it's about. So.
Okay.
So
you,
then
you came back to Atlanta after Tom died. Did you have? Well, just go ahead and tell us the next
well,
chapter.
there's kind of like 3 parts. There's that one, and then I met a man at Thanksgiving time, and it was a meeting like I never, you know.
Thanksgiving in Atlanta.
In Atlanta, and it was with friends, and there was only 6 of us for dinner, and there's this new guy there, and his name was Tom. And oh my God! So by Saturday, I got contact information, was leaving messages, we talked, and by the next Friday, we were heading to Callaway Gardens to spend the night to see the Christmas lights. And to put it briefly, I've mentioned that sex is not easy, and sex and relationship was not easy, and it was miraculous with this man. It was the first time where body, mind, and spirit I understood. I always thought body for sure, mind maybe, spirit no. I was doing the angelic, and I got body, mind, and spirit with this man. It was just really, really amazing. And we weren't even doing like very sexual things. You know, it wasn't. We never even had intercourse. The most significant thing is we were, you know, I guess you call it frottage. I was just on top of him. We were, rubbing, and I started to come, and I pulled back, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm coming, so I'm stopping." He said, "So am I, don't stop." And so, simultaneous mutual orgasm with no insertion and no hands. It's like, this will never happen again.
Yeah.
But 3 days later, it was happening again. So the way that we were connected with it was so significant. And oh my God, everything was heightened. We were together for like 2 months. He was bipolar. And I'm a trained professional mental health provider. So, do you have a psychiatrist? Yes. Do you have a counselor? Yes. Are you medicated? Yes. All of those things. So, bipolar folks can be really a lot of fun, and not so problematic if they're following the protocols that help them be a little bit more balanced. So he was doing all of that, and 2 months later, we were supposed to have dinner. He called me and he said, "I don't want to see you again," and I lost it. And I was so out of control that friends of mine said, "You need to get somebody here to help you because we're scared." And my friend Julia came from Athens to be with me and spent 3 hours with me. And I wasn't like going to kill myself or anything like that, but I was gone. And
was this 99, 2000-ish? Was it many
2002,
years?
2003.
Okay. Several years after the first
Yes.
film. Okay.
I may have dated some folks, but this was the first, this is really amazing. And it was then I was on the edge. I was hanging on fingertips on the cliff. And I talked to my friend Sarah, and she said, "My friend Bernard is going to be in town this week. I've talked about him before. I want you to meet with him. I'll set it up." And it was Bernard Marin. And we had dinner, and he said, "You need to go to GSB. And they're having a spring conference in a month or so." And I went to my first spring conference.
Wow.
So I started, that's what got me to GSB. That's what I started going to the gym, and I started taking Tai Chi, and I did that for like 6 or 7 years, and went through Yang Style 3, full range of that. So that brought me to these alternative kinds of things.
Was Bernard from Atlanta or some other place?
He was from Canada.
Oh,
Canada.
okay.
But he came and would do work in Atlanta.
Okay.
It's Bernie's from, it's Bernard from GSV.
Right, but I didn't know where he lived.
He lived in Canada, but he did a lot of work in Atlanta then. It was before it became more difficult to travel back and forth.
Okay.
So that's how I got to GSV. So then, and then in GSV, through GSV I got to Naraya, and through Naraya is when I met Lashes, and Lashes and I have been together for going on 8 years. And I can say this because we've had this conversation, that we don't consider ourselves a partnership. If you ask, we say, "He's my partner," because it's easier. We don't know what the word is. We really love each other. We're really great companions. It's not a partnership. He's in the will. He's significantly being, he's a significant other in my life, but we're not partners. So he's a significant relationship, certainly equal to or similar to the one I had with the first Tom. Both of those relationships is not the kind of relationship I had with the Tom in the middle. Never had a loving companionship relationship. We just had this glorious sexual intimacy. So,
Okay.
that's
All right. To go back to maybe your grandmother or someone else, were there things that happened when you were a child or a young person that you think were super formative, or people or mentors that, looking back on it, you're really glad that they were there for whatever alienation you might have felt than otherwise had they not been there? Or are you one of the people that does not remember having any super important relatives or people that pointed the way to the future out of whatever you were unhappy with as a kid, if you were?
The latter is more true. I remember thinking, it wasn't until I was much older, closer to how old I am now,
Mm-hmm.
if you said if I had to think about mentors, who would they be? I was blank. And it wasn't that, I mean, there was
Tell me about that grandmother you said was a pistol. Was she just a pistol for everybody in general? That was her personality, or she was your favorite?
It's 66 years old. My mother, who never had said a curse word, never, called her my grandmother a bitch, and I was like, "Oh my God, you finally have done it!" So my grandmother, if you hear the stories about my grandmother not from my father, but from my mother, and from my aunt, who was her daughter, and from other people, she was a bitch. She could be a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't hear the stories, that wasn't my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather, my mother's father, was a horrible man. He was a pedophile, and he was an abuser, and he was a rapist, and he sexually molested my mother, and he abused my grandmother and my mother physically and emotionally. He was a horrible, horrible man.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother, I had to make a decision at some point, like I would go visit my grandmother. My mother would be furious that I would be doing it, and I was doing it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became a therapist. I have a degree, and I'm like working with my mother. I'm trying to help my mother, My current counselor's, her favorite line is, "If it's not one thing, it's your mother." It's like, you got that right. So my mother tells me the story about her father, this royal bastard of man, and my sister, Angela, is sitting on his lap, on the floor. And she's like 8 or 7 or something like that. And he starts fondling her, or moving towards fondling her.
Mm-hmm.
And my father's mother, the bitch, she flies across the room, grabs this son of a bitch, picks my sister up and puts her over there in safety, and grabs this guy and throws him out of the house. She was this tiny, tiny woman.
Mm-hmm.
Throws this bastard out of the house. I said to my mother, "That's the story you need to be telling about my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
She kept your daughter from being sexually abused. That's the story you need to hold about that woman who had the bravery and the courage to throw that son of a bitch out of this house." Well, after that happened, he never came back to the house. I would say to my mother, "Why did you ever let him in the house to begin with? He was such a horrible person." So that's her.
Okay.
So my experience was, I was Paulie to her. She's the only person I ever allowed to call me Paul. I didn't allow her to. She did what she wanted to do. But if you were to try and call me Paulie, I'd say, "Excuse me, my name is Paul."
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yeah.
My youngest sister, Corinna, did, because she was a child.
What about teachers in high school, say?
Well, in high school, I had respect for it. I went to a private high school. I went to Chaminade High School, and you couldn't take the entrance exam unless you were top 10% of the county.
Uh-huh.
And there were only 300 people.
It wasn't a Catholic school.
It was Catholic
It was
school.
Okay.
So I went through from first grade or second grade through 8th, and then high school, and then 2 years at Fordham, Fordham University. So the first time that I started recognizing probably a little bit that men were different, and I found them exciting, but didn't understand it that way then.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of respect for education and knowledge and hard work and those things, I loved those brothers. There were brothers that taught there. And I always considered that time as formative in my life. So I had two things. I was in the Boy Scouts, and I was in the Order of the Arrow, and I was in a leadership position in the Order of the Arrow. And I was working in the third largest Boy Scout camp in the country. So those two things are going on simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And those were incredibly formative for me.
Okay. All right. Was there anything, when Bernard suggested that you should go to GSV, was the reason that you decided to go 100% because you were in the state you were in, or were there other things that made you curious about, well, that does sound like a good idea? You know, why were you receptive to going?
Well, I trusted Sarah,
Okay.
and I had heard about Bernard, and so I trusted her opinion of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was intrigued by the whole idea of spirituality, because I don't know if I thought religion was important. I wasn't necessarily separating religion and spirituality at this point
Mm-hmm.
so much. And the idea being with men, gay men, who were intentional, and was what I was looking for. You know?
So do you remember how old you were when you went to that conference?
It was 2003, so it was only 15 years ago, so I'm
Mhm.
69 now, so 54.
Okay. What?
Was that math right? I don't know if the math's right.
Probably right. I wouldn't know.
Whatever it is, something like that.
Okay. Was there anything besides the general Catholic backdrop that was religious in nature before GSV? Had you explored any other avenues? Or
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
the Roman Catholic Church was very significant for me.
Okay.
Not like drinking the Kool-Aid, but I had experience of the brothers who were really educated, and I had 2 years at Fordham, so the Jesuits. So the elementary education was with nuns who were crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't it. It was the brothers who were so committed, and the Jesuits who were so committed. And what they were talking about and they were teaching was not this, not this Roman Catholic Church offensive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was like belief systems and how you are, and these it's a different level
Mm-hmm.
than what was going on in the elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was intrigued by these, and they were also bringing in a bit of spiritual alternative stuff, because this is going to sound really weird, but it was the Jesuits were the setting for what was it, the famous movie about
Mission.
no,
Mission?
well, the Mission was one of them,
Yeah.
but where the satanic thing where where she was possessed and they did
Oh yeah, The Exorcist.
The Exorcist.
Yeah.
So it was Jesuits who did The Exorcist.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, they was like, this is interesting. These guys that I respect are also doing exorcisms, and so there was a mystery there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when I got to GSV, though, I will tell you this story is a story,
Okay.
infamous story that I tell a lot. I was afraid to go alone, and I don't like doing anything alone
Mhm.
because of shame and fear and feeling less than and out of place and all of those things. So my friend Lee agreed to go with me, and we were. And this is an embarrassing story to tell, but I still tell it. We were greeted by...
Was it his first conference?
It was his first conference too.
Okay.
So we were going there cold and blind. And this person, an older...
And it was a spring conference?
Spring.
Okay.
An older man met us at the reception area in the office, and he was an older guy and a little bit queenie, and had a sweater tied around his neck, and I was a little bit put off by it because I'm a boy queer, you know, I'm just like maybe not so much, maybe, and it wasn't horrible, he was wonderful, but it was like, this is, you know, pushes my girly boy things going on.
Right.
All right, then we get in the car and we're going to driving to the cabin, and this guy in this long black coat, like the cowboys had, leather coat, and leather hat, and was skulking through the woods and doing something, and that was scary. It felt creepy and scary.
Yeah.
So Lee and I both had a reaction to it. But then we went to dinner, and dinner was pretty okay. We sat with people, they were talking, they were friendly, we were okay. And we get to the opening, that was okay. You know, fire and opening and all that stuff. And then we get this, what's going to be circle, and they're talking about the heart circle, but then now there's this big build up to the introducing the presiding elder. And I love hierarchy, and I love leadership, and I have been a leader in the Boy Scouts, and you know, and in the, you know, schools, and you know, I love the whole idea of hierarchy. The Catholic Church, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah.
So we're going to meet the presiding elder. You know, what a name! You know, presiding elder, and in walks this guy in like pink sneakers, pink jeans, pink shirt, and pink hair. And I looked at Lee, and knowing that they were about to start the heart circle, and I said, and there were only like 30 people there, small heart circle. I said, Lee, how are we going to get out of here? We're obviously in the wrong place. He said, I don't know, but we need to get out of here.
Gosh.
So the first person was, but we didn't leave. The first person was Bruce, who I ended up hiring as an outreach worker for the agency because he was so good at making people feel comfortable.
Bruce Parrish?
Well, I wasn't going to say his last name, but you did.
Okay.
And the second person was Chaser, and he was putting up things in the forest, making it special. And you know, I've spent lots of time with him and on the beach and so on. He's a very wonderful, close, personal friend. And the third one was Craig, who was the presiding elder then, and we shared the property together. If I had gone with my instincts, we would have left. I wouldn't have known any of those men, and I wouldn't have had the experience of GSB and been held in a loving way.
Wow.
So
very dramatic.
that's why I like telling this story, because it was so wrong.
Yeah.
So wrong.
How did Lee do with the conference? Do you remember?
He never went back.
Okay.
He never went back.
Oh gosh. Well, what else do you remember about that conference? Or do you remember that particular conference as distinct from the others, or do they all run in a blur? Did you? I assume you left the conference a lot more comfortable than you got to it.
Yes, I remember people really came to me, and they said things to me which I now know are sort of by rote things that the GSB guys learn how to say, but being there the first time, they had a lot of meaning for me. John Warner was there, and he said to me, "We've been waiting for you." Now, I had never heard that expression used before, and I felt like it was. I felt he meant it, but you've been waiting for me.
Mhm.
You know, we've been waiting for you. And it felt like they were truly there to.
Welcome you in.
Okay, so it was one of the best conferences ever. Because juxtaposition to the pain that I was in, Perry Pike was there to do the Dance of the Universal Peace. Which was, have you ever, I don't know if you've had the experience, but when I became an elder on the council, the first conference that I convened, it was a spring conference, and we brought Perry Pike back to do the Dance of the Universal Peace. It had that powerful for me.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, so we could disconnect from whatever was going on in our personal pain stuff, because we had to learn the songs, and we had to learn the steps, and we had to dance and do those stuff. And Tim Flood was there, and here's the level of meanness that I can bring. He would make me laugh. This man made me laugh. And I don't laugh easily. And the third day, I don't know if you know Perry Pike, but he's the first experience I've ever had. That man could correct you in more positive ways than I've ever heard. I never heard him say anything negative. No, not that way, don't do that, nothing. It was always, let's try it this way. Or, okay, that's fine, now let's, and you knew it was wrong, but he never, ever corrected
Swatted you down.
Never made you feel bad.
Yeah.
But he was doing more and more complex things, so it was harder and harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
So one of me tried several times, and then he said, why don't I demonstrate with one of you, and then you can see it. And I said, which was so unlike me, that I spoke out, and I said this really mean thing. I said, well, dance with Tim, because if Tim can do it, the rest of us can.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim looked at me and gave me this incredible look and said, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And that formalized the beginning of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That Tim and I became evil twin sisters from that point on. But I really said that mean thing. I said, do it with Tim. Tim could do it. I didn't mean it in a mean way, but when you think about it, it was a terrible thing to say. If Tim could do it, the rest of us can. And I was doing it to be sarcastic or whatever, and he called me a bitch so significantly that the whole place stopped. And then we laughed and laughed and laughed, and it's the beginning of our great relationship. So that's what I remember of it, is dancing. And John Warner saying, we've been waiting for you.
Do you remember whether it was difficult to leave, or whether you were ready to leave when the conference was finally over, or anything about the ending of it? Did you feel glad you had come?
I did. We did that whole the dancing spiral at the end and singing Queer Friends.
Mm-hmm.
I just cried during the whole thing. I still can't do it without crying, and I've been to probably 18 conferences now.
Do you remember anything about did you leave with Lee?
Uh-huh.
Did y'all talk, process the conference at all?
I'm sure we did. I don't remember any of it, but I know that he was not.
Didn't take.
He was not. He wasn't inclined to go back.
Okay.
And I wanted to go to the fall conference. I always say to folks that I think people should not go to the fall conference first.
Why?
But maybe it was just because my experience, because I think the fall conference is a lot.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a taste of first, and then I think it's a little bit more preparing. Now, other people say you just get thrown in the water and you swim.
Mm-hmm.
So I get both ways, but I was glad I didn't go there first. I don't know if I would have survived it with the small groups. And even now, more than half of the fall conferences, I've been a small group leader, so I've been up there on Wednesday night, or I've been a leader on the council, so I've been up there Wednesday night. by Friday night I've had it.
Mhm.
And I oftentimes will go to bed after dinner because I am done.
Mhm.
And I won't be able to do Saturday and Sunday. So if I was doing it, without that knowledge, I don't know if I would have survived it.
Mhm. Okay.
The other thing, the other experience I had, the first fall conference that I remember is, I was terrified about sarongs.
Mhm.
And I've told this story many times too, but I tell it now. Corey was my small group leader, and Corey and Hunter were, I don't know if they were dating at that time or soon to be, but Corey did the heart weaving, and I thought, oh, this gorgeous man, and he's so smart, and look how wonderful he was. And then he was a small group leader, he was so wonderful. And then he's in my group, he's in my cabin, and so I was for some reason terrified about the dance and the sarongs. So I talked to Tim Flood, and I talked to someone else who was a really good friend, and I can't think of what his name is right now. It's the guy that, he'll come to me. But I trusted both of them, and they were very helpful. But they said, just do whatever you want.
Mhm.
So I'm getting ready to go to the dance, and I'm in the cabinet, and my idea of going to the dance is black sneakers, black jeans, and a black t-shirt. That's pretty much it, maybe a colored t-shirt, and that's it. And Corey comes in, he says, oh, I'm so glad you're here, you can help me get dressed and help me check. And I said, you know what, I am willing to help, but I don't have that gene. I'm really not good at this, but I'm willing to help you, that's
Mhm.
not. And he said, okay, fine. And he said, what about this? How do you like this? And okay, fine. So I'm getting dressed, and he says, he says, some people wear sarongs for the dance. And I said, yes, I know, I've already dealt with that, and I'm not going to wear a sarong for
Mhm.
the dance, it's not me. And he said, how about this, how about that? He's trying things on, we're doing this, and he says, you know what, most people wear sarongs to dance. And I said, oh, I am not most people, I am not going to wear a sarong. I was like adamant, don't fuck with me,
Mhm.
don't push,
Mhm.
I am not going to wear a sarong. Hey, how about this, how about that? And he's dressing, putting on things. And then he holds up a sarong like this, and he goes, you would look terrific in this sarong. And I said, yes, I would. And I grabbed it from him and I put it on, and that was it. So whatever was going on in my head, which was very strong, just left. It was gone, and it's never come back. It's come back with Sean.
Mhm.
Sean lived on in Owlwood, and so whenever he was dressed, however he was dressed, was fine with me, and I loved him, and it always was wonderful and okay, but it wasn't always okay if we were out in public.
Mhm.
And there was one time when we were meeting him and Craig, another guy and I were meeting him at a public restaurant, and he showed up as Shauna,
Mhm.
and we were really, really, really put out. It was really hard to be there
Mhm.
with him that way in
Mhm.
that place
Mhm.
without knowing it beforehand, and having to deal with how we felt and our resistance and our rejection and all the things that were going on there.
Mhm.
So it was really hard. That was really hard. When Sean did that presentation at the fall conference, when he did his story,
Mhm.
and so when people asked me, so why you like to wear women's clothing, and he said, I don't wear women's clothing, I wear my clothing.
Mhm.
That was transformational for me also. And I've never gotten over his loss, the loss of him.
Mhm.
He was, if you were to look at Owlwood at that point, there was Lashes and Craig and Sean and me, and they were like big personalities, and it was Sean that was holding it all together.
Really?
And I don't think you would have figured that out dynamically.
Mhm.
And I've never, I haven't gotten to even a comfortable place about losing him.
Mm.
He was a sweet man.
It's interesting how much we can change.
Yes.
Or when you think about how much we don't change sometimes.
So, so I have worn skirts at breathwork retreats that were not gay retreats. And I remember one time walking up a ramp, it was a handicap ramp, going into the meeting room. There was a woman standing there, and I was sure she was judging me negatively for wearing, I was wearing a skirt. I mean, this was not a place where people were hanging out with, alternative dresses. And she said, "Oh my God, you're the hottest man in a skirt I've ever seen." And I said, "I am, aren't I?" And I get it. When I wear a skirt, it's my skirt, and I'm a boy. It's not that I want to be a girl. There's nothing wrong with being a girl or transgender or whatever. But that's not what I am, and that's not why I'm wearing it. And it was her saying that was really powerful. She said, "You're the hottest man that I've ever seen in a skirt." And I said, "I am." And when I've done it, heart circles, introduce heart circles, and I'm wearing a skirt or wearing my prairie skirt to Naraya, it's just a powerful man. It's not, as a weak female or whatever that thing is I get about the parts of gayness that are less than, or that we, incorporated somehow.
I'm glad to hear this story because I have issues in that same part. Really, these areas. Okay. About how often do you attend GSB conferences? Is it on again, off again, ever since you started, or whatever? We ask everybody this question just to give people an idea of how familiar you are with them.
I was attending the spring and the fall, and then I started attending spring, fall, and winter.
Really?
And then when I was on the council, I attended all of them for 5 or 6 years. And when I left the council, I stopped it's not that I won't go, I didn't go to spring and fall and winter, but I didn't feel like I had to, and I didn't always want to, so I didn't. So I haven't attended all those, but I've attended, I don't think I've missed a fall conference since I started. I don't think so.
Do any particular things that happened at a conference stand out as super peak experiences over, given all of them? Are there favorite memories that you have, or not particularly? Because I just didn't want to lose those memories if you happen to have any.
Well, there's the Cassandra one. Cassandra scared me to death. And when you start talking about Cassandra, there's the beloved Cassandra people and there's the scary Cassandra people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they say, he wasn't scary. And it's like, yes, he was scary. Yes, he was scary. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean he wasn't beloved. You could be both. So I was in a group, and I'm not going to say the men's names, but Cassandra was one of them, and there was 2 other men. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else again with those 3 guys in the same place. Mm-hmm. And that poor small group leader has never been back to GSB. It was such a traumatic experience with these 3 guys. Mm-hmm. And if I said their names, you would know who they are and you would know why. Mm-hmm. And they're all wonderful and they're all right, but in the same group, oh my God. So I said to him, to myself, I said, walk towards your fear. And I said, I am not going to be disturbed and fearful and frightened and confused about this man. I'm going to walk towards it. And he announced that he was going to do, he was still doing the medallions in the fire. They were there all weekend, and then he would take them out and cool them off, and then you would get them as a going, when you left the conference, you'd get the medallions. I said, I'm going to come and help you. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And he went there, and I followed him, and he was not happy. And then he was out there, and he was doing all that bull stuff.
Yeah.
And then finally he just let go, and he said, okay, fine. And we did it. And that was it. So then years later, they were part of the talent show was going to be a remembrance of Cassandra.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever figured it out was wise enough that if you just told wonderful stories about Cassandra, people would say, because it wasn't wonderful stories. There were scary stories, there were horrifying stories, there were challenging stories, there was a whole combination of stories.
Yeah.
That's who he was, and that's
Mhm.
what he did to us. So they got a whole cross-section of folks, and we told scary stories, and people were just delighted
Of course they
that we
were.
could stand up and tell these stories
Yeah.
and still have a loving memory
Uh-huh.
of how this guy impacted our lives.
Mhm.
So that was the one. Then the next one that I mean, there's a lot of them I can think about, but this next one was really powerful. Some guy came, and you know when guys come who are the hot visions, you know, and they can make a path.
Yeah.
You say,
Everyone is smitten.
oh my God. So there was this guy, and he was so good looking and so hot. And I was teaching, we were doing mind, body, and spirit, and I was doing the body part, and it was Tai Chi piece. And he was doing I don't know what piece he was doing, but he was doing chanting. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this, and I am not going to like this. So I'm going to be, you know, just sentiment about how people were treating him, how special he was, and all this stuff. And then he starts doing chanting and teaching chanting. It was like being in the presence of an angel. So I was like, oh my God, this guy, he's wonderful. He's so wonderful. And I said, but you know what? He's not going to come to my Tai Chi thing, because now he's done his thing, he's going to leave. He was right up front the whole time. He was on every minute. He stayed afterwards. And he said, show me this and show me that. And at one point he says, this is one of the things I could do, I do at home. And he did a front handstand, whatever, and his ass came up like this, and his ass was right here. And I said, I'll bet your partner really appreciates this, and you need to stop right now, because I can't stand it anymore. Oh my God, he was so gorgeous. And I'm doing all this juxtaposition thing with me.
Mhm.
How can you have this? This is a beautiful, wonderful, hot man, and you're making him less than and feeling shamed about it, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then we get to the talent show, and of course he's going to sing. Yeah, now the hot guy's going to sing, and he sings beautifully. He's got everything right, and he starts singing the song, and he gets like to the second partway through it, and he forgets the words. I go, forgot the words.
Imperfection that lasts.
And the audience started humming.
Uh-huh.
And he was going, and he wasn't getting it, and they started singing very, very low, and they gave him the song, and he kept singing. Everybody was crying.
Great.
It was such a powerful
That's
moment
sweet.
about how, you know,
Mm.
everybody was willing to hold each other
Mhm.
and have everybody be wonderful and terrific and supported and inspired and be their best self.
Well, I'm glad you told that story. I hadn't heard that. Keynote speakers. Did you have any favorites?
Oh,
Or do you remember anybody in particular?
Well, John Stowe was a legend, and I had, and he was walking around in a skirt the whole time, and I thought, again, this guy in a skirt and this, that, and the other thing, and then I started doing this this thing about, man, he looks good in that skirt, and he does that well, and he's just, and I started, he inspired me. I'm not remembering names today. Who's the guy who talked every year? He's one of our
Andrew.
Andrew. So Andrew, when he did, he was talking about. It was basically two flutes playing stories from that. I remember being in tears in the audience, listening to him, feeling like I had a place.
Yeah.
So I remember that. Clyde, when he was there, I don't think he was especially. His presentation, I don't remember it being. It was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was okay, but his presence is what I remember. And when he did the opening and the calling of the directions, and that was just so powerful. And I remember that I was inspired by him in terms of who he was and what his profession was and what he had done, and how real he was. And I wanted to be closer to him.
I don't know who that Clyde person is, but maybe
Clyde Hall, who's
okay.
he's the founder of the Naraya, and he lives on the Shoshone Reservation,
Okay.
and he's an attorney, and he was the magistrate there for a while. So he's a remarkable man, and he and who was like the first speaker, the moon guy, the author of The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon.
Spandauer.
Spandauer. He and Spandauer are buddies.
Okay.
And they hung out together with Cowboy, and they're all in that. Once you know Cowboy and Clyde, you know them in the story. You see them in the story, and sometimes they tell you who they were, what they Sometimes they don't tell you.
Okay.
So I have to think about who they were. I think the time that the guys told their stories, that was really when Spandauer was supposed to come the second time and he was ill, and Chase just got not just, but asked like 8 people to tell 8-minute stories. That was really incredible. And Treewalker told his story. I think he died the next, I think either that January or a year later or something like
that. Do you remember the talking stick, how it got to be incorporated into the GSB thing at all?
Well, I've been doing research about the talking stick, and what I've said is the talking stick is an example of how the story is in the mind of the person telling it.
Okay.
And that there isn't, even though some people might say there is one story and it's the way they're telling it, and we know who those people might be, my experience is there isn't a story about the talking stick. And I need to interview a couple more people till I have, like, most of the people were there at the first and second conferences to get sort of a vision of it. I can't necessarily, I'm not going to say that my story is the right story, because there isn't a right story, and I've said this publicly, there isn't a right story. There wasn't a talking stick. The talking stick that we used was not at the first conference.
Correct.
Were you at the first conference? oh, okay, I need to interview you also.
I'm not going to remember it.
Yeah, all right. Well, it definitely was not at the first conference. It might have been either the second or the third conference is when it arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And it came from, who were the guys? I'm not prepared in terms of
that
names.
Native American person that
Yes.
Raven knew. and
Raven.
brought.
Raven was the one that started the conference, and
Mhm.
I know the guy, and I can't think of his name. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
And so the story is that where there is some linkages that, or some agreement, is that he brought something,
Mm-hmm.
and he gave it to Raven,
Mm-hmm.
and that became the beginning of the talking stick.
Okay. How did you end up on the council? Was it a linear thing? Was it
No,
real easy for
it
you
was
to do that?
my angry self.
Oh, how so?
My angry self is a really powerful person.
Mm-hmm.
It was when that council, David Salyer, who I love and respect and admire,
Mm-hmm.
when he stood up there and said they had decided to close it down,
Mhm.
it was like, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you?
Mm-hmm.
You don't make decisions for the community,
Mhm.
which is ironic because I don't think there is anything for the community. We just give it a name, call it community. There isn't a community.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, you don't get to decide this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if somebody wants to take it on, take it on.
Right.
And at the same time, they were negotiating with me to, they always in the fall did a strategic planning retreat.
Mm-hmm.
So what they said was they had decided to disband, but since people were interested in continuing, they negotiated with me to come in as a consultant, as a paid consultant,
Mm-hmm.
to do the retreat. And David, I'm sure he still stands by this, but he said, and we're paying you for this. We're paying you $300.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, then you're not paying me for this, because it's Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and all the preparation and all that.
Right.
$300, really?
It's a lot of money at that time.
The point wasn't the money. I didn't want the money, and in his Davidness, in his Salyerness,
Uh-huh.
he said, most people give back the money. And I said, I'm not going to do that. So in my orneriness, I gave half of the money back. And I gave away the other half so I could say I never kept any of that. But I did not, no, I didn't. $300, really.
Okay.
So, and they were very proud of it, and it's like, what? That's like,
Right.
Not that I made that money, but I mean, people are at least $1,000 a day
Yeah,
per consultant,
Sure.
And I did surveys ahead of time. I went in there prepared. So that's when we came up with the idea of opening it up to more than Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
and the idea that we don't have the idea, so let's form a task force, which is creating the idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it came from.
Okay.
And we would never have guessed at that time that Jim Jones and Dennis Penn Avery and I would become the threesome at the top of this group.
Mm-hmm.
If we had to pick people, we had this conversation, we would never have picked. None of the three of us would have picked the other two
Mm-hmm.
to be in relationship with, to
Mhm.
run this council,
Mhm.
run this task force. And although things were kind of wonky towards the end with some of them, with one people, I think that threesome, the three of us, were incredible for a long time,
Mhm.
and we're where it was amazing to work with Jim and Dennis
Mhm.
for a long time, and then I guess that things started becoming not so good for lots of different reasons.
Well, let me, because I have such a vague memory of that particular transition in the structure, I want to get it straight just for me, but also because for the archives it would be nice to know somebody who was there to clarify what happened. And all the, not in a lot of detail or all, but my memory of that time was that the most people who came to the conference were either from Atlanta or Asheville, and the people who were in Atlanta had been doing the work, however it was done, and that there was a burnout issue going on and a little bit of resentment from people who were not part of the planning, and that in my selective memory it was sort of an exhaustion thing and a kind of an impasse. We don't know what to do, so we're just hoping that somebody will want to pick up these threads and keep it going, but we can't do it again. We've gone a year beyond what we said we were exhausted at, and so I'd like to hear you say again what the handover was. It wasn't from Atlanta to Asheville.
No.
It wasn't that simple.
No. You're right.
But was burnout part of what you...
I think it was. The council then, you'd have to talk to them because I wasn't on the council. And boy, when
There was a council
There
then?
was a council. When you
Okay.
talk to the council members, their story, is a little bit different also,
Yeah.
because you don't have one story.
Mhm.
What they would do though is, they would finish the fall conference and basically say, now we're gonna do spring, then at some point they started doing winter. Who wants to do it? And somebody from that council would say, I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
And it wasn't, and then that was it. The council was doing all of the things. And it's not that they didn't call in, they certainly called in some other people for assistance, but not so much.
Yeah.
And Andrew, and again, talk to Andrew, because I can only get secondhand
Mhm.
what these things are. But I know that Andrew was a significant advisor for the council for many years. And would do an annual letter about
Right.
planning and the way things should be and so on. And Andrew, I think, had this idea that organizations at 20 years go away,
Mhm.
and that we were moving, and he could do this better than I can, because he was saying it, that what was going on with gay organizations, they were at endings at these points and transitions, and they have been.
Yeah.
And so it was a good time to go away. I think they were tired and wanted to end it, so they may have been premature in making that decision.
Mhm.
But they were clear in that they weren't going to do it anymore.
Right, and my impression was that it's not that anybody wanted it to stop. It's just that they knew if they were expected to do it again, they were not going to do it.
Yes, that was
the ball
true,
had
but I
to be
think
taken to somebody else
You're,
if it was going to occur. But I didn't feel any sentiment that it would be okay if it never happened again. We would all be very sad if it disappeared.
I think there are some folks that thought it should end.
Okay, all right, I didn't realize that.
That there was both,
Mhm.
and that may have been fewer, but I think there were some people that were thinking it should end.
Okay.
That's the way organizations go, and they have an ending
It
point.
was a natural ending,
I-
or
I think you could find
not
people
sad.
would tell that story.
Okay.
Yes.
And so then, now I'm remembering that this word task force was invented as a transitional structure
Right.
to come up with a new structure
Right.
and have a vision statement or whatever, so that
And it was clear we needed to find a way to enable folks who did not live in Atlanta to have significant roles.
Okay.
And for a while, we really thought about that for a long time and researched it and did all kinds of different things. And my opinion, again, you could talk to the others and then they'll have different opinions, is we never found a structure that we thought would work and that had been successful for any other organizations. And the more we let it go, the less control we had over it and the more liabilities we felt there were involved in it in terms of a name and as a nonprofit organization.
Right.
And although some people thought that was okay, other people thought it was not okay.
Yes.
That if we had satellite operations and they were doing things, that we weren't wanting to control what they were going to do, but they were going to do things that were not part of the guidance of the organization. That was a challenge, and we couldn't find another example somewhere, somebody who successfully did it. That's why we said no to those things. It's not. We even said no to the local group, and people really pissed off that we don't want to run the monthly potlucks anymore. Atlanta needs to do the potlucks. We need to do the conferences. You do the potlucks. We need to figure out some other name of the satellite things that kind of feed into. But there's a liability issue here.
Right. Now, looking back, I hadn't thought about this until this moment, but it's pretty remarkable to me that there was never a break in the conference schedule.
Yeah.
And that's a miracle. I mean, it's not really a miracle. It probably was a lot of, but that is pretty remarkable to me. That the task force didn't call a timeout for 2 years.
We knew that would be the death of it.
Really?
We knew. We met monthly on that phone for as long as we needed to. We had sub-meetings of subcommittees on the phone. We met. And we knew we had to go to that at the end, because what David said was they were going to do one more.
Yeah.
And we knew that at the end of that one, we had to say, this is what next year is going to be. And we had the dates of all the conferences, we had contracts of the mountain, we knew who the conveners were going to be, and we knew who the presenters were going to be. We knew what the themes were. So the folks leaving there were reassured.
Yeah, well, I think that's incredible that happened.
And we did things like reminder cards and notes and all that thing, so we really let them know that we were organized and moving forward.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say about the sociological evolution or de-evolution of the organizational thing? Or you don't have to, but if you have any observations about the arc of the way it has been done, that would be interesting from your point of view. But I understand the diplomacy part too, so you don't have to. But it's an opportunity if you have some reflective comments about how you see, in retrospect, what was going on.
Well, I am an outlier in this. I think that I gave a little bit of a clue in that, and I don't. In order to have a presence, and I need to not always be, critical of what's going on. So, the fact that we call it community is a challenge for me, because it isn't a community. And I've said this, and I've heard it parroted back. How dare they say? And it was something that I said. The way you become part of this community is you pay registration. So I've said that, and it's come back to me as a really negative thing. Well, it's true.
That's right.
It's true. You register for a conference, that makes you part of the community. There are other reasons why you're part of the community, I get, but I'm not denying any of that. But it's not a membership.
Right.
It's not an agreement. It's not a, this is
an initiation.
Initiation. It's none of
secret
those
society.
things.
Right, right.
So then all the folks who have paid registration think they have ownership and can decide how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really crazy making.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how could you all have an organization and plan things when the attendees get to
It's all
decide?
in flux. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
always in flux. So I think that that has always been a challenge. And then you have some folks who are considered elders who steer things in ways that shouldn't be steered.
Mhm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
they say this is this is the way it was, this is the way it is, and it's like, in your world it might be that way, but that's not what I remember.
Right.
You know, it's that.
Yeah.
And things get
And
said.
all organizations seem to have that
Sure.
factor going on. So,
Sure.
and we're not immune to it apparently.
Sure.
So
Cal,
it's
you
a
know,
sociological fact.
there are things I hear the new guys saying that I said.
Yeah.
I said for the first time, like 7 years ago, it's part of the history of the organization. No, I invented that 7 years ago because I had to do it, whatever, you know, and all of a sudden, but they're repeating what I'm saying, you know. So it's like, it's interesting how things get incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a negative, but it's like, you know, and I think that people want to be a part of something. And they want to feel a part of something. And I go there and I feel alone sometimes, you know. And the fact that I can feel alone in my group, in my community, in this place, that reminds me of how it's our own stories and how people are feeling. And you know, we can't just create something and make everybody feel a part of it. We can't do that. But we have to be aware that they're creating things for themselves, and we're enforcing it in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
That's making them feel less than or reshamed, and we're revisiting difficult kinds of things. So it's people come there thinking they found Mecca and everything's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when we decided we were gay, and now we're going to find our tribe and we're going to be accepted and fine, and then we realize, oh shit, they're just like everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, they're opinionated, there's hierarchy, there's you know, there's classism, there's racism, it's all here too, but they're gay.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's you know that stuff. You know,
Mhm.
you have to do the work of being invested in who people are and what they bring to the table, and you know what they're looking for.
Okay. From your experience of being part of a lot of our other organizations, or some other organizations, how would you describe GSV as different from them? Or there are probably similarities, but what's it like to know you're going to a meeting X of, you know, some organization that's not GSV versus your kind of take on, okay, now it's time to work on GSV stuff. I mean, how is GSV different from other organizations that you've been a part of?
Okay. Wow, that's a really, really insightful question. And,
Given that there are similarities, what is your experience of working with this one versus working with other, like professionally, say, but gay organizations?
yeah.
Do you think it's that distinctive, really?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm feeling and thinking that I oftentimes say that the best thing is a talent show, and that's an example of how we are inspired by the creativity and the ability of our colleagues, our brothers, our sisters, our, the other folks that are with us, and we inspire them. And we, I think that when you look at the conference from beginning to end, it's amazing that we can get that much into it and include so many creative aspects of a human's personality. So the rituals, the altars, the shows, the dance, the small groups, that we have all these different layers of stuff going on simultaneously by a volunteer organization. I think what we're really saying to folks is you can experience who you are here, and you can create something, and you can be something here that you might not be able to be somewhere else, and that you'll be not automatically accepted for it. The chances are you're going to find acceptance and camaraderie and delight from other folks. And the other organizations that I think of would be more structured, like the Boy Scouts or counseling centers and HIV organizations are really very different.
They're what, more hierarchical?
Hierarchical and service-oriented in a specific way.
They don't welcome a lot of creativity and...
I think so, in some ways. With this one here, we're inviting, we're giving people the opportunity to open up, feel safe, and explore, and then hold them. Because we can't make them safe. We can't make anybody safe. But we can give them tools to find safety in something, someone or some group or something. And we give, I think what we're giving is the idea of you don't have to hold on to that shame. There are other folks that are like you, that are in the struggle. It's not that membership thing that we talked about before. It's not that we're not all alike. And that we can come together and celebrate and be in service and in ritual and enjoy together.
Despite all those differences.
Right, despite the differences.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it that way. I also agree that, I think that one of the things that's going on in the talent show and other arenas is courage. There's a lot of very moving courage that's witnessed and rewarded too, which is not necessarily the case in other organizations, maybe.
Right.
If you go out on a limb, you're going way out on a limb, and
They seem to be more specific purposes of it. This is the job or the role you have to do. And the GSV, it's more like try something, experience something, get out there a little bit.
Is there a way to talk about the proportion of importance that GSV is in your spiritual path compared to Naraya or some of the other, whatever other things that have been on your path? Is it, I know you can't quantify it, but is it a negligible, optional, super important, you're really, on the spectrum of importance of these other contributors to whoever you are spiritually?
When you say that, I go back to telling you a story about 2 months dating the bipolar guy. And then wham, damn, gone. So I think that Naraya is that way, and I think GSV is this way. It's like, now I found it. Oh, it's back down again. It's like not what it's So it opens, I think it opens up to more, it's not just one thing. Oh, it's not just one answer. Oh, it's not just like, come and take what you can, explore and be, inspired, see what inspires you and what you find to be, what brings out your creative spirit, what speaks to you, and use those things. And then you're going to have to figure out that you're going to be disappointed because there's going to be some revisiting of shame or being, setting a boundary set or a disappointment or something where you thought this was going to be just all complete, and it's not. And I haven't found anything to be complete. The Buddhist things that I've studied, the Roman Catholic stuff, the Tai Chi, they all have really wonderful pieces, and they're not complete. They're not all. They're not the only thing. Whereas some of the people that are in those things, for them, it's the only thing. So.
Does, before, the relationships and friendships and networks that you had before GSV versus after GSV, did they, apart from the work that you did for GSV and the attending of the conferences, did it result in newer or stronger friendships in your networks and friendships circle?
That's a...
Is GSV a place where those people have come from sometimes? Or are they an equal number to all these other networks that you
I'm
are in?
glad you brought that up because it's significant. That I would say that the relationships I had before I still have on some level, but my life changed the second I went to that conference, and not that conference, that first conference. And most of my world right now is GSV, made up of GSV people, people that I've met through GSV.
Okay.
Not exclusively,
Right.
but it's primarily.
So it has affected your circle of friends and acquaintances.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and in both ways. I want you closer. I want you farther away.
Okay.
I want both of those things, but my life has been really enriched by the relationships I've had with GSV.
Okay. You mentioned earlier the advice that you might have for somebody thinking about going to a GSV conference is, and what you said was that maybe the spring or the winter inoculation process might be better than the possibly overwhelming fall conference. What other things would you say to somebody who you've convinced to go to GSV, let's say, a hypothetical person? What would you tell them? Would you tell them anything to try to prepare them for what they're going to do, or would you want them to have a blank check going in, or would it depend on the person? Or have you ever sent anybody to GSV or tried to get somebody to come?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you told them about it? To try to make sure they had the best experience instead of freaking out or whatever they might otherwise do.
Well, again, I'm not going to be able to articulate it very well. It's that business of thinking, oh my God, I found a place, and then being disappointed with it, being inspired and disappointed at the same time. So once you get there, it's like, oh my God, these are similar folks, and so there are things that I've relied on as crutches or barriers in the past that are no longer there, because they're all gay folks. They're all this, they're all that, they're all the same, and some of the things are still the same. I don't like them, they don't like me, they resist shame, they're embarrassing, whatever it is.
Right.
But there's something different. The language is now different, and I have the opportunity to be and learn differently, because some of the things the barriers that I've set up aren't there anymore, the artificial ones, that the straight people are this way. Well, they're not. Yeah, so what I do is I encourage folks to find other people to be with, and I like the idea of a buddy. you know, at the conference, so they're not going through it alone. And especially if they're not with the fall conference where you have small groups, and even the small groups aren't enough. Conference is too big. Then we have the counselors, or whatever we call them, or the guardians that they could go to and help. Even that's all good, and we need them, but it's still not that. I wish we could have more of the one-to-one, that we link folks and say, go to Cal, talk to Cal. If not Cal, and you find Randall, and you can talk to Randall, find someone else that you can have some reassurance with, some conversations with. Because you're going to, all of a sudden you're going to have, your life is going to be in this wonderful turmoil that's going to go on.
Do you feel that the small group aspect of the conference, the fall conference, is crucial?
Yes, I do. But now, there's a prejudice that I have because I'm a trained counselor. And I don't think it's a counseling process, but you use some of the same techniques. So the negative things is the folks that don't participate in a way that's, I think, balanced and team building and so on. The last time I did it, I had the most amazing group of folks. And if I made a list of people, no, I don't want them in my group ever. None of them were there. And some challenging people, some people who I'm personally challenged by, were intimidated by, were there. And we were able, so I got to have, I've done this a lot of times, so I got to have the experience of saying to the group, I think this is a really special group, and I think we could use some counseling skills, not counseling, but counseling skills, to go further and deeper in this experience if you'd like to. And we did, and it was unbelievable. It was really, really good. But I think that some of the folks that are there, they're not going to be able to do that. If you look at John Stasio, I won't be able to quote him right. This is really kind of the negative part, but it's the the elephant in the room that doesn't get talked about. That you can't have organizations being guided by the most psychotic person in the room, and they oftentimes are. He didn't say psychotic, but he said, I've got the quote, and it was really, really wonderful. When you think of times when you go off balance, and it's not, you want the psychotic people to be there. They're giving you some interest and information, some balance, and some, they're good to have too. I'm not saying that. But if they're the guides, so sometimes the organizations are balanced by or weighted by people who are not taking their medication properly, or or not being treated.
So, the small group process is good, but it should be very carefully. The leaders should be chosen very carefully.
Yeah, the leaders need to be chosen very carefully. And it's not a counseling process. You're not diagnosing. You're not resolving issues. But but it's not just talk about what happened in the gym last week. It's what is this experience that's happening to you now that's different, that you've been exposed to, or you've come up against, because you're here now in this group, in the larger group and the smaller group, that you can feel safe talking about. What a rich experience that is. And not everybody can come to the table with that.
Okay. There are questions that are still here, but I think you've touched on them, and I don't want to exhaust you. So I want to leave room for two more things.
Okay.
One is to go through this list of people who are dead now, who you may have had contact with and memories of. And we're trying to create to record some of the memories that people have of these people that are not going to make any more memories for us. So I want you to just glance through this list and stop when you have a memory of somebody, and take all the time you need to do that. And then there's one other thing after that.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh, this is a
And this
very
could be
long
very
list.
exhausting, and it's a long list, and so I think it would be just as valuable for you to have 2 or 3 things that you remember pretty vividly than 25 things. Don't strain at trying to remember each person, but everybody remembers different people. So together we can kind of have a composite of who were these people.
Right.
What we want to get from you is what you remember they looked like, what they felt like, and just some interaction you might have had with them that you're glad you had before they died.
And a story.
Or a story.
Well, I've already talked about Sean
Mm-hmm.
a little bit, and then Jamie's on here.
Yeah.
Jamie just died recently. Jamie was an important person to me. He was on the board of the agency that I worked at.
I didn't know that.
And when my partner died, he and I found him really a sexual turn on. I found him to be an incredibly beautiful man, and I told him so every time I had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And he really supported me when Tom died, really significantly. And he said that he figured out, he was a counselor,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that executive directors are a breed of their own, and they don't have support groups.
Mm-hmm.
And he set up regular counseling with me, with a professional that was only executive director oriented.
Mm-hmm.
That's how smart he was about
Wow.
that.
Oh.
And it was very, very powerful and very, very good. There's 2 other things I want to say about Jamie. So we had a guy who's also died. We were going to have him, he was going to be the facilitator for a strategic planning retreat for the board. But we knew that he could, that sometimes consultants get off task. Sometimes they stay really on task, and sometimes they get off task.
Mm-hmm.
And we really wanted it to be a certain way. And so the founder of the organization was not me, although I was there when he founded it, and I was the first director, so people think I'm the founder. He came and went, and then I'm still there, so he says, you're the founder, but I want to be, at least honor him. So we met with this guy and said, no, this, not this, not, and then he wanted to do some, he said, no, everybody knows each other, we don't want to do any opening thing where you get to, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and we had several meetings, and the guy came in, and the first thing he says, we're going to start with getting to know you. No, he said no, no. And he does it. And there was a guy who, an accountant guy, who was the accountant guy. He told the most heart-wrenching story in this counseling group. So how ironic is that? We
Yeah.
would have dismissed him as, not dismissed him, but
Right.
he's an accountant. He's
Yeah.
not going to tell an emotional story.
Mm-hmm.
And he told the most emotional story. He had us all in tears. So what did we know about, manipulating the whole group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it came to Jamie, and Jamie was the last one. And Jamie, had a presence, and he was beautiful. So he had the intelligence, he had the ability, and he looked great, and all that stuff. And he talked about his 2 brothers who were big old butch, burly boy football players, and so was his father. And how his father had a great relationship with them and not with Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie was a gay boy, more on the feminine side, and all, whatever went with that. And he, instead of doing football in high school, was a baton twirler.
Mm-hmm.
How juxtaposition is this?
Right.
Not even neutral He's a baton twirler,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
He gets to the state finals. So he's telling the story. His father's friends say, you have to go and support your son. But he's a baton twirler. You have to go. And they got him to go. And his father went to support Jamie in that. And he made it to the second to last round.
Mm-hmm.
And he did flaming batons, and he set his shorts on fire. So we're in this meeting, being emotional, and doing what you're doing now. And he just said, "You can start laughing now." And I just cracked up. Oh my God! Look at the juxtaposition of things going on there with his father, and he literally sets his pants on fire. Oh, flaming faggot! There you are, right? So I'll never forget that.
Story.
So I'll tell you, I have known that man for over 20 years. He was sick the day that I met him. He had some things that they knew of, and he had some things that they didn't know of. He had allergies to so many things that whenever he came to anything, he had to bring his own food. He had to move to different places in the country to survive. And some people said, even recently when he died, he's the healthiest man I ever knew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a really great example of how we do, we say things.
We make up stories
We
about
make
people.
up stories. He was the sickest guy I ever knew. He was the hottest looking,
Yeah.
he was the healthiest looking, and he was the sickest guy I ever knew. Because it didn't manifest in deterioration of the exterior.
Mm-hmm.
And he fought that his entire time I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a courageous man.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved him, and I will miss him dearly. Oh, God. So Martin, of course, Martin was one of my mentors. And again, it's a story of hope. There were just a few of us that were with Martin at the end of his life, and he was in ICU, and then he would go to a room, and there were people who would then announcing to GSV, Martin is getting better, he's now in a private room. And I was infuriated by that, because the reason why I was in a private room is because they couldn't do anything more for him in the ICU. And yet people were wanting a good story, wanting to be the trumpeters of news, and they're telling their own story.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really painful for me. Martin, I found him to be a mentor, and then I was troubled by some of his substance abuse issues, his addiction issues.
Yeah.
And because I didn't want him to be addicted, I wanted my mentor to be perfect in every way. And in that way, he asked me to help him and use some of my skills to help him. And how wonderful that was for me to be raised up. And I learned about the addictions and their power, and how to be helpful, and how to be frustrated, and how to have to lose somebody that you really cared about, didn't want him to go. And I had just that the way that he could be spontaneous is something that I've never been. And I would go look at him going, oh my God, look at him, look at him. I really miss him. John Mungo was a disappointment to me because I had to deal with the fact that people make choices to want to live or not live. And that is a story that our community faces all the time, with suicide, with addiction, with HIV, with failure to take medications, to not have the resources to pay for things. I thought John was brilliant and wonderful, and he made decisions about wanting to continue on this path or not, and I was really frustrated by that.
What did he look like? I don't remember him.
He was a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was like 6'4", and he was a counselor. He went to jail for a while for insurance issues, which was he was providing services to people who couldn't get them. So it wasn't because he was an awful criminal. He was not. But he got caught and he went to jail. And he protected a lot of people, and he went to jail, and not the other folks did.
Wow.
He was brilliant. I remember he, I think it was after he came out of jail, he came to DSC, and we used to do a new person, like orientation, and we did it right there with everybody in the room. So he called everybody. He sat on a little stool, and he was this great big guy. He sat on this little stool, and he asked him to sit there like he was in kindergarten. He did the most amazing new person orientation I'd ever seen. I absolutely loved that man. He used to come to my house unexpectedly, and he'd say, "Paul, every time I come here, you're dirty. You're full of dirt." Because I'd be working in the ER, and it'd be covered with mud. I love that guy. Philip Rush.
Talk about him a little bit, because nobody else has done that.
Philip Rush. I knew him as a provider of funding, because he worked at the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta.
I didn't know he was a GSV person.
He did? Oh.
No, was he in the early days?
Yes. Because it was I didn't know he was. I just knew him as the funder. I had to, treat him specially.
Yeah.
And then he was there. He was at GSV. What? Whoa. And Philip was a thinker and a talker and a strategist, and it was I think it was the first time where I could stand my ground. And I could say, it was the first time when I realized that I had something to give somebody, and they didn't want to hear it, but it would be helpful to them, and I think I needed to share it. So I was able to do that with Philip when he worked at the foundation about some organizations or people that he thought needed more attention, and I was thinking, you don't know some things, and you're gonna get embarrassed. So Philip Rush had a really good friend, Doug Carl, and he's a friend of mine, and he had a woman friend of his that was sort of like his wife, and she had a son, and that was sort of like his adopted son. And those two of them had a relationship with Philip that was more than you can expect in terms of the great love they had. And he died unexpectedly. He just died.
Who did?
Philip. He had an aneurysm or something, I don't know, but he went in the hospital at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night and was dead by sunrise. So it was really horrible. And so they had, they had a memorial service at Frogs here because he loved frogs, and then they were going to have a more intimate service on the West Coast, and they were going to release his ashes into the Pacific Ocean at a certain place. And there were, I don't know, probably a dozen people that were invited and knew at some point. People came from Hawaii, people came from different places to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like lemmings going to the sea. And it was just so wonderful. And we went and we had lunch at the most incredible place and the most incredible meal on the way up, going up the coast to this park that literally overlooked, looking down at the little islands and the seals in the Pacific Ocean. And he was going to be released there, and he was wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wealthy family. And his brother was carrying the ashes. And I'm going, oh, see, wealthy people have these special things. And I'm looking, that's an ice bucket. He's got his ashes in an ice bucket. And it turns out he forgot to buy something, so they had to figure out what to bring. So he said, well, I'll use this ice bucket. He said, that is so perfect for Philip Rush to be carried to be, in an ice bucket. And then we get to the space, and we're ready. We're ready. I mean, this has been 2 days, and we've come from all across the country and the world, and we had lunch, and we did this, and we're ready. We're ready. So then they bring up a bottle of Jameson's. Oh my God! I've had more Jameson's on behalf of Philip Rush than ever cared to. Can't stand this stuff. You had to toast. So they ended up saying, we need to talk about Philip Rush. We've talked about Philip Rush. No, we had to talk about that. And then they said that everybody had a shot, and every time somebody talked about him, they'd fill up your glass again, and you had to toast him. I said, I love him, but I can't do this many shots. So it's like, it was clear that this guy and this girl, this man and this woman, were not ready to let go. That they loved him so much. This was the last moment, and they were going to throw his ashes over the cliff, and they couldn't do it, and they were stalling. Mm-hmm. And how sweet and wonderful that was. Yeah. So finally we're going, do it, come on, do it. And instead of the ashes going out, the insert of the ice goes flying out, and goes thunk, thunk, thunk. It gets stuck on the cliff, and ashes go poof. And we start guffawing. How perfect is this? And Philip manipulated the last thing just to make us all laugh. He was a great guy. He really was concerned about treating people equally. And he was very concerned about racism and what we were doing as a culture. King Thaxton, people talk about in terms of it, like he's the patron saint of the organization. And my first small group, he was sitting next to me all the time, and I thought he was a pain in the ass. He was an awful thing, And and then I got his gift, and I don't want his gift. I think he's a terrible person, And you couldn't say that because he's like the patron saint of the organization. And then my second group, the second time I was there was the second spring conference, and Hunter did a retreat, did a sweat lodge, and somebody, maybe Tree Walker, no, not Tree Walker, somebody brought King there so he could be there, and he was still a bitch, I said, is it just me? Why am I? And somebody finally said, "Oh, he was always a bitch," but he was wonderful too. Yeah. And I never got to see the good parts because I never knew him when he wasn't very ill. So I didn't get to see him when he was doing the mandalas, when he was organizing the art projects, when he was inspiring people to do all this stuff. I just saw the cranky old man who was about to die. So, and I remember the the brave thing that I did was I took that gift and I brought it to a small group, and they opened it, and I said, that belongs to King Saxon, and I don't find him like my mentor, and I know people did, so I wanted to go back into the group where you respected him more.
That's brilliant. That's
So
brilliant.
that's, and I told the story about being less, myself being less than. That my experience of being with him was not that great. And then people would say, you had the real experience. It wasn't that great. So that juxtaposition stuff. Because Dennis Van Avery, I can't talk about Dennis so much because I know things that other folks don't know, and I was there towards the end of his life, and I was not happy about how it went down. But he was a man that made choices, and he made them happen. So, and he inspired me, and he did wonderful things, and he was a good friend. But at the end of his life at GSV, he was being affected by the worst parts of his personality became more present, and he was being affected by the medication, and it was really difficult for us to watch and be around and watch it disintegrate the organization. But we got to be more personally involved towards the end and be with him when he died. John Whidden is the last one I'll speak about. This David Witt. What a sweetheart.
What did he look like?
He was like maybe 5'8" or something, a little heavy set. I only knew him when he was sick, and we bonded right away around HIV stuff. And I had sources, so he would like give me medication to give away to people and stuff like that. He was a lovely, lovely man. I loved him and Joe, who was still alive from the very beginning, and it was like, and he was really good friends with Tree Walker. It was like, who would have thought that Tree Walker would have gone before you? It was a wonderful guy, But John Whidden, the story is more about how spirit interacts with our life. I think John Whidden was a wonderful guy, a wonderful artist. I didn't really get his art so much, and I wasn't inspired by his art, but I knew that he was a good artist, and I knew that people liked it. And now his angel work, his work is I'm more inspired by now than I ever was when he was doing it. His angels are just really incredible. But in terms of spirit, there was a group of nurses who were going to have a yard sale to raise money for a conference that they were doing, and it was about nurses providing services to people with HIV. So I said to Lashes, we're going to get stuff ready, and we're going to go and offer it to them to sell the yard sale early in the morning when they're setting up, and then we're going to go have breakfast with the guy who's now the director of the agency and his partner. And then we're going to go back to where the nurses are selling the stuff and support them in selling the stuff. And so we get there, and one of the nurses who I've known she's a tough broad and really smart, and she's and she was at the IDP and infectious disease program at Grady, and then she went to CDC. And she was in my group when I did grief and healing retreats. And that's how she knows me, in that really sensitive, nurturing, fragile moment, So she was really great. And she was a little bit stressed and anxious and out of control when I got there. And she came over to me and she said, "Well, you're going to buy something, you're going to just, and I said, calm down. I'm going to be here for a while." And she said, "Do you like folk art?" And I said, "Yes." And I thought, this is weird. Boy, she's kind of attacking me and trying to talk me into buying something. I know I'll give her money and I have to buy something is what I'm thinking about. I'm like, what is going on? And she said, well, there was this guy, and I used to follow him art-wise, and I have one of his pieces, and I'm downsizing, so I want you to see it, see if you want to buy it. She shows me this piece, and I go, there's a familiarity about this. And it's a frame, the way it was framed and the artwork, and I look at it, it was a John Wooden painting.
Oh, strange.
And it's hanging in my house.
Oh, okay.
So he got a painting to me in this really sweet way.
Wow.
He was a sweet guy.
I do remember him now. He was part of this couple, and they were always together there, together.
At the end of his life?
Well, I mean, at the conference. The conferences.
Jeff Jacka?
Well,
Or
there
was
were
there one
two
before?
bearded guys. I think I'm thinking of the same one.
Well, Jeff Jacka was the guy that did, he was a really hot guy, and he brought the flagging to the conference. But John was there long earlier than I was, so he may have been there with someone else that I didn't know.
Okay. Didn't he live in Oregon or somewhere?
John?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. He
I'm
lived
mixing
in
him up now.
North
There were
Carolina.
two guys who were from the Northwest or had moved to the Northwest, and one of them died in the last 2 or 3 years. I thought that
Don
was
Haddon and John Wooden, or John, no,
Yeah,
Haddon and, I don't know who they are.
that's who I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
This is another person.
This is a different person.
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to get who. Haddon is one of them.
Yeah.
Haddon's, I think, the one that died.
Well, his name should be on there.
He's not on here.
Really, I need to check that and make sure that he gets on there. Are there people who have been in GSV who are not on this list that you expected to see there? Because I don't know that we've got everybody.
Who have died?
Mhm.
I don't know. There's
Okay.
no one that comes to mind that you don't have
Okay.
there.
All right. What is Wendell's partner's name? The guy who just
Jake.
died.
He's on here.
He is?
John Giesling.
Okay.
Or I don't know how you pronounce it, but Jake. Well, I only knew him as Jake. He's on
Okay.
here.
Okay. I'll put it on there again. Okay. All right. So thank you for that. The last thing is for you to talk about anything that we did not cover or touch on that you sort of wished we had that's related to GSV. You know, something that we just didn't get to. And you want to be part of the record of your experience with GSV and that you haven't talked about because I didn't let you.
No, I tell you, you didn't let me. I think that I think that the organization sometimes gets led by things that people say because they think that they're elders and they're wise, and I think that's an error sometimes because we get steered in different ways. It's like when I said, oh, I'm hearing that traditionally since the beginning we've always historically done something, and I started it 6 years ago. You know, it's not 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that whole elder stuff gets a little
Too much regard.
right to and some things. So what I perpetually hear, Randall knows this more because we're talking about my frustration more with Randall because of that he's been a convener and stuff. We hear stuff all the time that's like, there's no basis for what you're saying, yet it gets perpetuated. And it gets perpetuated so people say, because they heard it, so they say it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I can't abide by is this whole business about we need to be more for this group or that group, or need to get young people or this or that or the other thing. We are who we are, and we've never had trouble getting people here. New people are always coming. We get who we're going to inspire.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to other people from other minority groups, and they've said, Paul, we're never going to come to that group because you don't offer what we want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's nothing wrong with what you're offering, but it's not what so I get a little frustrated, and I wish that we would just be okay with who we are and understand that we say we always hear we're always getting older and we're going to be disappearing. It's not true. You know, we can perpetuate things that aren't true. There are always young guys coming in. You know, there's one guy staying at my house last night that's not even 30 yet, who's been around. He's one of the original evergreen guys. I'm 69. He's not even 30. We obviously are appealing to. Now, we're not getting massive. We're not going to get massive in folks. We are who we are. So this whole business about sometimes the elders, that we would give elder status to folks in terms of wisdom, and they're saying things that just cannot be corroborated. I think we're offering something that's really, truly unique, and we need to make sure that we're honoring that, and we're nurturing that, and we're inspiring folks to be there. And we need to be confrontational about bad behavior.
At the conference or in our organizational meetings?
I shouldn't have said bad behavior, but
Well,
you know, there when we did the visioning thing, some guy stood up, and it's a guy that I like, and he told this story, and the group was like, oh yeah. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. I was so angry, and I started to leave at the break, and he got in front of me, and I said, I know why you're here. I know why you're here. Because you didn't tell the truth, and now folks believe that. I'm really ashamed of this. I was furious at him. He could have told his truth, which would have been very powerful, but he swayed the group in a different direction. And that's just unfortunate that we do that. You know, because some of what's going on is our own failures. And we're not looking at our own crap. You know, you're not being invited to because you're a pain in the ass.
yeah, right.
You know, look at your own behavior. You know,
Right.
you were invited to this, you were invited to that, and you keep getting rejected all through your life. You're the common person here. So ask the mentors, the wise people, the people that you trust, what it is about you that you are finding that are putting people off or something. That would be more helpful. I was livid at what he did. So, and I love the guy. And I said, how many conversations have we had about this? And you did this and that? And it's not the only one. It happens regularly.
Yeah.
It happens regularly.
But you think some of the, tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, that the concern about the perpetuating the organization is unnecessary energy misspent. We should just focus on doing what we do, and who we will attract will come, and it will not. We don't need to put energy into legacy stuff so much as. Well, what about the blind spots? Do you think we have some?
I think we have blind spots. So when you say that, I said I want to be open to always looking.
Okay.
But if we just say if we want, you know, two-legged ducks to come.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on two-legged ducks. Why? You know, why? I want to know why. And I want to know why if we want millennials, they're not going to come. You know, there's people who aren't going to come because it's not what they want to do. So do we need to change the organization so that they're here, they come? I'm not sure. We need to be insightful and thoughtful about this. And I think we are.
Yeah.
But we hear these voices sometimes saying, we don't have enough horses here.
X, Y,
we
or
need
Z.
more horses here.
Yeah.
We don't need more horses here. We have just what we need here. You know,
Yeah.
if we're doing things that are racist
Yeah.
and fascist and genderist and so on, that's the blind spots that we're doing. We're doing things that are offending people and keeping them from here or driving them away from here because we're not being thoughtful and inclusive. That's different.
Yeah.
That's different.
Okay.
Welcoming and inclusive is different, then we have to have ducks here.
Right.
You know, no, we don't have to have ducks here. We need to have here.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, on the way home I'll think of them, but
Yeah.
right now I feel,
Exhausted.
but it's been very interesting. I thought I would have trouble answering some of these things, and I certainly didn't have any trouble
No.
answering them.
Well, thank you so much.
I think that it's important, this is important work that you're doing.
Because.
Well, because the stories have to be told.
Yeah.
Stories need to be told.
Mhm.
And they aren't generally told, and in our organization, not in this organization, but in this community, this world, and so on, we're becoming more isolated and less able to hear and less able to tell the stories of who we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we're doing it in ways that don't give us the opportunity to,
Mhm.
and we don't. I was in a group one time at the agency where I work, and there's many staff members there, and we do a continuing education program, and there were 20 people in the room, and somebody said, we don't need to do a get to know you thing because we know each other, and I said, no, we don't.
Mhm.
We work together, but we don't know each other.
Right.
We know some things about each other.
Mhm.
But if we're going to be a counseling organization, to think that we know each other because we're together in this way is a
Mhm.
mistake.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing here. We don't know each other because we're gay and we showed up and paid the registration and go to the conference.
Mhm.
We know each other because in the small groups we did this. We know each other because we took chances at the talent show, and we supported, and we, whatever it is, that's how we know each other.
What I'm hoping for, one of the things I'm hoping for as a result of this is that anybody who's trying to write or describe or talk about the organization will have some emotional content, can see that this was kind of important to these people and some inkling of why, instead of just here's the structure from this year to that year, and then they did this, and then they did that.
Right.
So that's what I'm hoping will come through. And it has. Every interview has been, for me, it's like going to the conference in a way, because people trigger my own memories of what it felt like, and they are remembering what it felt like. And that's the whole point of this. What did it feel like to be part of this story? So thank you.
The one other question is, anybody you'd recommend that we do an interview with that perhaps would happen?
I think we talked about this, and there was some that I suggested.
Yeah.
I think that you asked about lashes, and I think it would be a good one,
Okay.
because he would have a really different opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do want to get that. We want to get lots of different perspectives and not overlook somebody that has a really different one. Okay.
So,
Thank you. We can stop.
are we turning this off now? Or
We
what do
can.
We can.